as a caster, as a brilliant one as you are as well, when you're kind of looking for the way in which you kind of navigate the best way to kind of bring the action to people, viewers at home, and cast what's happening too, is a lot of it kind of like gameplay focused, or are you kind of focusing more on like kind of the storylines around teams and players as
Yeah,
well?
that I mean, that is a ratio that's been tweaked over the years. At when I started, it was very gameplay focused because I just didn't have the backlog of knowledge. Not that the backlog is very dense at the moment, but it's just I didn't have the knowledge there. And as I've gotten more ingrained with it, and as I've obviously worked the game more, there's a mix between a lot of Rocket League is phasing, and a lot of esports. The nitty gritty parts of commentary come down to like, all right, like you know, in the start of the game, how do I want to approach the storyline? In the middle of the game, how do I want to approach the storyline? When do I jump in and out of my position as a color commentator or play by play? When do I do story? When do I inject stats? A lot of this is storyboarding for commentators. So like for Rocket League, at first it was very just strictly the roles that you're defined as do that. Over the years, the storytelling's gotten more ingrained with the gameplay. My approach was as of late has been very, like set this when we begin, set the stage, set the story based on kind of what's happening in the opening minute and a half. Then we can start working in some stats if it feels appropriate. And it's essentially just read what the game gives you, and then we'll adjust the how we approach the game from there. But yeah, the way that we phased Rocket League now, and then me and my duo do it is just storytell and set things up, set up the pins first minute and a half, and then halfway through the game jump into our actual roles, do the dirty stuff, and then in the last 30 or so seconds start knocking the pins down, start bringing the story back for game one, talk about what the story is at the moment, what it should have been, or what it's going to become, and then look how the series is moving forward. And then between all those phases, you can jump into how you want to manipulate your cadences in like the first phase, and like how you think your cadence can bounce off of your storytelling. Me and my duo have been playing a lot with tenses, which we mean is like using stats in past tense, using stats in current tense, using sentence structure that can change between if a play is breaking down, does that mean that then we need to move into talking about the game from where it was a minute ago? If the play looks like it's going to develop, do we then jump into like really specific in real time like synonyms and things that just like really focusing on the timing of how do you orchestrate a commentary call based on what the game's given you, what you have prepped for it to be, and then can you it's all about synonyms at the end of the day. I mean, the one thing commentators harp on is like obviously you want to have synonyms for your vernacular, but having synonyms for vernacular and also having it for how you're seeing the game, how I cannot just see the game as it is now, but how I can, let a minute go by, download it, and then regurgitate what's happened from a different perspective. Doing that consistently in and out of different phases, that has just been because Rocket League is so in a box, there's not really a lot of outside info. It affords the ability to get super, super creative with how you break down your approach to the game. Like COD's different. That's one thing I told guys when I came in was like, for COD, it's like, oh, the spawns are over there. I know this team's gonna start rotating. They have an anchor that just died. So like there are things off the map that I can play with and have fun with. In Rocket League, everything's in front of you. And it's like, well, damn, I can't talk about some guy OEing and like what this means because the next 20 or 30 seconds are entirely dependent on what's happening right now with who's on the ball. So how do you pull yourself in and out of pockets of being present and like working in past tense and in future tense? So yeah, a lot of that weird stuff that has all just been a result of Rocket League is a very restricting game with what it brings to the table. But the balance between hard commentary, your roles, and then getting creative with the roles themselves and what those gaps afford you has been the most rewarding part of the experience. So
And you articulate it so wonderfully as well, because I think a lot of people naturally will watch. They'll watch an event of some sorts online, an esport of some sorts, and there's a flow. There's a kind of like a natural kind of picking up off each other's sentences. There's kind of like contextualizing things, and you play by plays versus color casting, and the seamlessness, the fluidity of a duo is so it's such an incredible thing to see it happen in when you're in like an arena and in real time as well. It's one thing seeing it online when you have just you have just the gameplay and you're just hearing voices. To see kind of like yourself, your duo partner, you're seeing others kind of like casting the action live as you're watching it, as everyone else is around you as well. The energy, and there's a lot of pressure as well in those situations because obviously you've got to make sure that you don't want to you don't want to miss a single high. You want to make sure you kind of give every key moment the justice it deserves, for the players as well as like the broadcast, everything as well. And I think people forget like the amount that goes into it. You said, working on synonyms and working on kind of vernacular and things. There's so much more than just I want to be a caster. There's so much more to
It's
that
I
kind of
mean,
skill set.
it is a commentary. I've always viewed it as it's a very, I think for a lot of commentators it's a very personal practice. It is an art form in a lot of ways. It's a very devotional skill set. You have to devote yourself to like getting better. But it becomes an instinctive practice a lot of the times. It feels very like, like there were moments last year where, if I look at our games at Worlds, where it's like Achieves and I, like, we're talking about the game in real time, something happens, he breaks it down, I give a quick analysis cut. Then he takes it, somebody scores, he hits the moment as it happens, and I say, hey, instead of recapping whether defense didn't play their or didn't do their job, what if I take the tense back and we go back to what happened in Boston, give a quick anecdote and keep it going, and then move back to current the current moment and just keep doing, like, there are moments where it's like, okay, all the things that I've planned and all the things that I'm trying to work on really come together. And like, if the game's not giving me much, I can manipulate what I get from the game and I can do what I want to do with this now. And so you see like the rewards there. You see the efforts of like, okay, we phased all of what we did, all of our three phases and all of the additional micro phases in this game correctly. And then there are games like we had at Boston between like Vitality and Rule One, which is like a 17-minute 0-0 game, where it's like, okay, we phased for about 5 minutes and then we got into overtime and nobody was scoring, but like we had one of the greatest overtime games of all time. So there was about at the 7 minute mark of OT when nobody scored, Isaac and I at the time were like, hey, we're no longer gonna phase this game. We're no longer gonna try to like, rigidly stand. We're just gonna react. So like it's knowing instinctively when to be a commentator and when to just be a fan and react and just go along with the ride is the fun part. That's the part I think we all live for. So yeah, like as much as it is like minutia and as much as it is like jumping into the details, sometimes you're gonna get games where it's like, hey, the universe is telling you you don't need to like commentate here. You just need to like react and just be present and just enjoy it. And that's what we got, which is like the final 5 minutes of just like we're just screaming. We're like, what is happening? So yeah, it is an art form and a skill set, but it doesn't mean that you can't kind of surrender to it at times and just let it exist. And when you surrender to it, it's a current, like you try to paddle upstream as much as possible, but there are times where you need to just turn the engine off and just let it take you where it takes you and then go down and figure out what happens. So
And are you doing this all through like a look at each other or like a hand gesture? Like how are you? Because obviously you're on live mics the entire time. Do you have like your own way of kind of agreeing on a way of like a practice of some sort? How do you kind of tend to do it in your way?
whenever, for me specifically, like whenever I work with somebody, if I don't have good reps or if I don't have like immediate chemistry with them or good reps with them, it's always like, what can I do in whatever role to make you feel comfortable? What do you want to do? And I'll do the opposite. And then like if things get really, really casual and even, that's great because then we can do a hybrid. But like with the Chiefs, like he was strictly like color commentary. Sometimes he does play by play, but he was strictly color. I was usually strictly play by play. So like we just knew the roles. Like when I a lot of this is just obviously practice, but when you cast a lot, you especially it helps when you cast with the same person a lot. You know their handoffs, when their voice, when their inflection's going down, so they're about to end their sentence. You know when it's going up, so maybe they want to keep things going. You just know the person, like how people talk. So it's like, okay, I can sometimes pick up on when Achieves is going to hand off, or if he just handed something off, and I'm like, I don't have much to say, so I want to ask you a question, and I'm just gonna throw it back. It's a lot of that stuff of just being close with the person you're working with, just knowing how they operate, and obviously, like a lot of like when you're in person, it's like a lot of hey, keep this going. Hey, keep note of this. I'll do a lot of pointing if somebody's on a really good point, and I can tell they're gonna wind down. They've said their 15 seconds, and they want to close it out. I'm gonna say, hey, no, 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 you're keep going. You're on something important here, or you're in a moment, don't stop for me, please continue. That exists a lot. But there are times where like with Isaac, during our OT, it was just it was a lot of it was a lot of pointing at times of like, hey, this person's over here with the ball, keep an eye on this just happened. But we were both basically locked in of just like when I hear him stop yelling, I'll then come in, and like it just worked in real time. I think casters do share a brain. They're in it together, and that synchronicity is really cool.